What truly makes a criminal dangerous? Is it the body count, the ruthless cruelty, or the terror that lingers long after they're gone? History is filled with villains, but a rare few went beyond breaking laws. They rewrote them in blood, reshaped societies, and shattered humanity's trust. From tyrants who wielded state power like a weapon, to warlords who drowned entire nations in conquest, to doctors, gangsters, and predators who hid behind masks of respectability, each embodied a unique form of evil. This is not just a list of monsters, it's a journey into history's darkest pantheon, where every name is a chilling reminder of how far human cruelty can go. At number 10, we begin with Pablo Escobar, a name that redefined modern crime and transformed Colombia into a battlefield of fear. Known worldwide as the King of Cocaine, Escobar didn't just run a cartel, he built an empire of violence and terror that shook entire nations. By the 1980s, his Medellin cartel was responsible for nearly 80% of global cocaine distribution, making him one of the wealthiest criminals in history, with a staggering fortune of over $30 billion. But Escobar's influence extended far beyond smuggling. His infamous motto, Plata o Plomo, silver or lead, forced politicians, judges, and police officers to either accept bribes or face death. His ruthless strategy created a climate of absolute fear, where corruption and assassinations became everyday realities. Escobar even pursued political power, briefly entering Colombia's Congress while simultaneously funding housing, hospitals, and football fields for the poor, a move that cast him as a Robin Hood figure among many Colombians. Yet his quest for dominance unleashed chaos. Presidential candidates, attorneys general, journalists, and over 1,000 police officers were assassinated during his reign. The bombing of a Colombian airliner and countless car bombs proved his willingness to slaughter innocents for political leverage. Escobar was more than a drug lord. He was a warlord who declared open conflict against his own country. His story epitomizes how unchecked wealth and ambition can turn a criminal into a threat to national stability, making Pablo Escobar one of the most dangerous figures to ever walk the earth. At number 9, we encounter Ted Bundy, the chilling embodiment of charm turned into a weapon. Unlike mobsters or dictators, Bundy's terror was deeply personal, exposing how evil could hide in plain sight. Handsome, intelligent, and articulate, Bundy shattered society's assumptions about what a killer looks like. During the mid-1970s, he embarked on a horrifying spree across several U.S. states, preying on unsuspecting women and leaving behind a trail of devastation. Bundy's tactics were terrifying in their simplicity, posing as an injured man with a fake cast or crutches. He lured victims into vulnerability before overpowering them. More than 25 young women lost their lives, though experts believe the true number could be much higher. His crimes included brutal assaults, abductions, necrophilia, and even the collection of trophies from his victims, allowing him to relive the horrors and assert dominance long after their deaths. Bundy's danger lay not just in his violence, but in his ability to blend seamlessly into society, evading capture for years due to his outward respectability and legal knowledge. He escaped prison twice, further cementing his reputation as a cunning predator who believed he was intellectually superior to everyone around him. Bundy forced society to confront the terrifying reality that a seemingly ordinary neighbor, student, or colleague could harbor unimaginable darkness. His case became pivotal in criminal psychology, shaping how investigators profile organized offenders and psychopaths. Ted Bundy remains infamous not just for the lives he ended, but for the permanent psychological scar he left on the world, proving that danger sometimes wears the face of trust. At number 8, we move to the Prohibition era, where Alphonse Al Capone rose from the slums of Brooklyn to become America's most notorious gangster. Unlike killers driven by impulse, Capone built an empire, one fueled by bootlegging, gambling, and vice, turning Chicago into a city of blood and corruption. During the 1920s, Prohibition created a vacuum in which organized crime thrived, and Capone filled it with ruthless efficiency. His network generated millions of dollars annually while rival gangs fought bloody turf wars. Perhaps his most infamous act of violence was the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 men from a rival gang were brutally executed in broad daylight, cementing Capone's reputation as a ruthless crime lord. Yet, what made Capone uniquely dangerous wasn't just his violence, it was his ability to blur the line between criminality and social acceptance. To many, he appeared as a benefactor, providing illicit liquor and sometimes even charity, which won him public sympathy despite his bloody record. His empire corrupted officials, police officers, and politicians, showcasing how deeply crime could infiltrate the system. The US government, unable to convict him for his most violent offenses, ultimately brought him down on charges of tax evasion, a landmark case that proved even untouchable mobsters could face justice through unconventional means. Capone's reign revealed how organized crime could evolve into a structured, almost corporate entity, capable of challenging government authority itself. His story is not just one of brutality, but of power, influence, and societal decay, making Al Capone a true mastermind of terror in the criminal underworld. At number 7, we had H.H. Holmes, remembered as America's first documented serial killer and one of the most chilling predators of the 19th century. Born Herman Webster Mudgett, Holmes was a swindler, fraudster, and master manipulator who combined intelligence with sadistic imagination to commit atrocities under the guise of respectability. Using his medical knowledge and architectural cunning, he built a 3-story structure in Chicago during the 1893 World's Fair, later infamously called the Murder Castle. This building was no ordinary hotel. It was a labyrinth of hidden passageways, trapdoors, gas lines, and soundproof rooms designed for torture, murder, and disposal. Visitors came to Chicago in search of wonder and progress, but for many, Holmes turned the city of dreams into their final resting place. Though he confessed to 27 killings, experts estimate his victims may have numbered in the hundreds, as countless fairgoers disappeared without a trace. Holmes thrived on the anonymity of urban life, proving that even in the heart of a bustling metropolis, unimaginable evil could flourish unchecked. Unlike a shadowy figure lurking in darkness, he was a well-dressed businessman, blending seamlessly into society while engineering a private house of horrors. His arrest in 1894 ended his reign, and he was executed in 1896. But the chilling legend of his castle endures. Holmes's crimes symbolize a terrifying truth that beneath the progress of the modern age, monsters could build empires of cruelty, hidden in plain sight, exploiting both opportunity and innocence. At number 6, we turn to Jack the Ripper, perhaps the most infamous unidentified killer in history. In the autumn of 1888, the East End of London descended into terror as a faceless predator struck repeatedly in Whitechapel's dark alleys. At least 5 women, all sex workers, were brutally murdered and mutilated in a series of crimes that shocked Victorian society. The savagery of the attacks, characterized by disembowelment and grotesque precision, suggested not only cruelty, but also a cold knowledge of human anatomy. What set the Ripper apart was not only the brutality of his crimes, but the way he captured the imagination of the world. He taunted authorities with letters, mocked the police, and fueled panic through sensationalist newspaper coverage. His true danger was symbolic. He became the embodiment of a society's deepest fears: poverty, crime, and the fragile line between civility and chaos. The murders exposed the grim living conditions of London's poorest residents, forcing middle and upper classes to acknowledge the squalor they had long ignored. At the same time, his mystery identity became a cultural obsession, with over 100 suspects named across the decades, from surgeons to royalty. The Ripper's reign revealed how crime, media, and fear could intertwine to create a lasting legend. He was less a man than a myth, a phantom whose anonymity made him untouchable. More than a century later, Jack the Ripper remains an unsolved enigma, his ghost haunting history as the eternal symbol of violence without justice. At number 5, we arrive at Harold Shipman, whose story represents one of the most shocking betrayals of trust in modern times. A respected British physician, Shipman exploited his role as a caregiver to orchestrate one of the deadliest killing sprees in recorded history. Over nearly 30 years, from the 1970s to the late 1990s, he murdered at least 215 patients, with suspicions of as many as 250 victims. His modus operandi was deceptively simple yet horrifyingly effective, administering lethal doses of diamorphine to elderly patients, often women, before falsifying records to disguise the true cause of death. Shipman's position gave him unprecedented access to society's most vulnerable, and his carefully maintained image as a dedicated doctor allowed him to evade suspicion for decades. Even when caught in 1975 for forging prescriptions, he was permitted to return to practice, highlighting catastrophic failures in oversight. Later, a police investigation in 1998 cleared him due to poor evidence gathering, enabling him to continue killing. Ultimately, his downfall came not through medical scrutiny, but through arrogance. His attempt to forge a patient's will raised suspicion, leading to his arrest and eventual conviction. Shipman's crimes shattered the public's faith in medicine, demonstrating how dangerous it can be when evil hides within institutions designed to heal. His legacy forced sweeping changes in medical oversight and raised haunting questions about how many more lives could have been saved if the warning signs had been heeded. Shipman is remembered not just as a murderer, but as the embodiment of corrupted trust, proof that sometimes the most dangerous predator wears the mask of a savior. At number 4, we uncover Gilles de Rais, a man whose life swings between heroism and horror, leaving behind one of the darkest legacies in medieval Europe. Born into immense wealth in 15th century France, he was a celebrated nobleman and military commander who fought courageously alongside Joan of Arc during the 100 Years' War. Appointed Marshal of France, his early years were defined by honor and chivalry. Yet once Joan was executed, Gilles withdrew from military life and retreated to his vast estates, where his story descended into terrifying infamy. Accusations later emerged that he had abducted, tortured, and murdered countless peasant children, luring them with promises of work or food before subjecting them to unspeakable abuse. Some accounts claim the death toll reached as high as 800, making him one of the most prolific killers in history. His crimes allegedly involved mutilation, ritualistic sadism, and necrophilia, staining his reputation forever. However, his trial was plagued with controversy. Confessions were extracted under threat of torture, and the Duke of Brittany, who stood to inherit Gilles' confiscated estates, had a clear financial motive for his conviction. In an era when the church considered sorcery and heresy graver crimes than mass murder, it was his alleged dabbling in the occult that sealed his fate more than the slaughter of children. Historians still debate whether he was truly guilty or the victim of a political conspiracy, but his association with sadistic legend became immortal. At number 3, we encounter Joseph Stalin, one of the most ruthless dictators the modern world has ever known. Ruling the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s until his death in 1953, Stalin wielded absolute power, transforming political paranoia into a weapon of mass destruction. Unlike criminals who terrorize individuals, Stalin terrorized entire nations, systematically eliminating those he perceived as threats. His most infamous crime was the Holodomor, a man-made famine in Ukraine between 1932 and 1933. By imposing impossible grain quotas and punishing peasants for even collecting scraps of food, Stalin engineered starvation on an unimaginable scale. Borders were sealed to prevent escape, ensuring millions perished in agony. Estimates place the death toll between 3.5 and 7 million, yet famine was only one weapon in his arsenal. Stalin orchestrated the Great Purge between 1936 and 1938, a reign of terror marked by show trials, executions, and mass deportations to the Gulag labor camps. At least 750,000 people were executed during this purge, while millions more languished in brutal conditions where disease, starvation, and overwork claimed countless lives. What made Stalin especially dangerous was his ability to cloak atrocity in bureaucracy, turning the machinery of the state into an efficient engine of oppression. He silenced scientists, artists, and intellectuals, ensuring that creativity and dissent alike were strangled in service of his paranoia. Under Stalin's reign, entire ethnic groups were deported, cities lived in fear of midnight arrests, and neighbors turned against one another in order to survive. His brutality reshaped the very soul of the Soviet Union, leaving scars that linger to this day. Joseph Stalin's legacy is not only one of staggering death counts, but also the terrifying lesson that a dictator's paranoia can transform a government into the most lethal weapon of all. At number 2, we face Adolf Hitler, a man whose poisonous ideology reshaped the 20th century with unparalleled brutality. Rising from obscurity in post-World War I Germany, Hitler exploited national despair, economic collapse, and political unrest to establish a dictatorship built on hatred, racial superiority, and unchecked authoritarianism. Once in power, he mobilized the resources of a modern state to commit atrocities on an industrial scale. Central to his regime was the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of approximately 11 million people, including 6 million Jews, alongside Romani people, Poles, Soviet POWs, disabled individuals, and countless others deemed undesirable. Nazi Germany institutionalized murder, constructing concentration and extermination camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor, where victims endured forced labor, starvation, medical experiments, and gas chamber executions. But Hitler's crimes extended beyond the Holocaust. His aggressive expansionism plunged the world into the bloodiest conflict in history, World War II, causing the deaths of over 70 million people worldwide. His regime initiated the mass killing of Soviet prisoners, ethnic cleansing in Eastern Europe, and programs like Action T4, which exterminated the disabled. Hitler's reign forced the world to invent new legal frameworks, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. To even begin to describe the scale of his atrocities, he was not merely a dictator. He was the architect of a state dedicated to annihilation. Hitler's downfall in 1945 ended his reign, but the devastation he left reshaped global politics, orders, and morality. His name has since become synonymous with evil itself, a warning of how radical ideology fused with state power can unleash destruction beyond comprehension. At number 1, we conclude with Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire and the most fearsome conqueror the world has ever known. Rising from the harsh steppes of Mongolia in the 13th century, Genghis Khan unified warring tribes and forged an army whose speed, discipline, and brutality were unmatched in history. His military genius lay in mobility and terror, cavalry archers who struck swiftly, and psychological warfare designed to paralyze entire populations. Cities that resisted were annihilated with shocking efficiency, while those who surrendered often lived in fear of betrayal. Khan's campaigns of conquest left behind staggering death tolls. Historians estimate that as many as 40 million people perished under Mongol expansion, an unfathomable number in an era when the global population was far smaller. Accounts of massacres are legendary, such as the obliteration of Nishapur in Persia, where every man, woman, child, and even animal was slaughtered in retaliation for a slain general. Mongol armies flung plague-ridden corpses over city walls, diverted rivers to flood towns, and executed entire populations as examples. His terror was so vast that it left measurable marks on the planet itself. Scientists suggest the depopulation of farms during his campaigns reduced carbon emissions, lowering global atmospheric levels. And yet, paradoxically, Genghis Khan was also a state builder, establishing trade networks, codifying laws, and fostering communication across Eurasia. This duality makes him uniquely haunting, a leader who enabled unprecedented cultural exchange. But only by standing on mountains of skulls, his name alone became synonymous with destruction, a warning whispered across continents. Genghis Khan's reign remains the ultimate testament to the devastating power of conquest. When one man's ambition reshapes the world through both innovation and unimaginable slaughter. The legacies of history's most dangerous criminals are more than tales of blood and terror. They are mirrors reflecting the darkest depths of human nature. From tyrants who commanded nations to killers who hid in plain sight, each revealed how fragile trust, power, and morality can be. Their stories remind us that evil doesn't vanish with time. It adapts, waiting for the moment to resurface. If you found this journey into history's shadows intriguing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching.